On the 15th of May 1996, John Marshall, a 35-year-old male from Essex, failed to finalise a business deal in Kent and was reported missing later that day by his wife Tony. Although the black Range Rover he was driving in was seen crossing the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge at noon, he failed to return home or keep any other appointments that day. 7 days later, on May the 22nd, an officer found Mr. Marshall's body under straw in the unlocked boot of his Range Rover parked in Sydenham, South London. He had been shot twice in the head and chest. Who is John Marshall? What is he to us in our story of interest, and why is he in this story? This is the story of John Marshall. Hi guys, thank you very much for joining. Welcome back to this eagerly awaited John Marshall video. Just recently, a lot of people have been asking about this man, so I feel obliged to do what I can to fill you in with what I know and what I've found, and I will share that. So let's get on with it. The man you're seeing on your screen is a young John Marshall. I can't tell you exactly how old he is there, 18, 19, 20, I would guess. Pretty obvious that he's got a very distinctive tattoo on his chest, which is of importance. As you heard in the intro there, this man was found dead, and this tattoo would have been used by the police to identify him, wouldn't it? He was married and he had 3 children. He was a father of 3 children when he died. And this, obviously, you're seeing on your screen is he holding one of these children. We'll get onto it later, but a family member has called him a devoted family man. I'm nobody to question that. However, depending on which way you want to look at it, whether you want to look from a more sinister point of view or a non-judgmental point of view, there are 2 sides to this man's story from different sides in society. For example, we've got one side saying this man was heavily involved in drugs, yet his family say he was absolutely no way involved in drugs. All these details will be revealed, but first, please watch this.
Marshall said goodbye to his wife and told her he'd be back in a few hours. He never returned. He was dead by the next morning. Where did he go that day? Good evening. There was £5,000 in cash in John Marshall's car, yet the killers left it behind. Why? Police are looking for the murderer of car dealer John Marshall. He was killed between the 15th and the 16th of May. He'd been shot twice, once in the head and once in the chest, before the body was bundled into the car. Despite press speculation that his shooting was drugs-related, the police are keeping an open mind about the motive. Our reconstruction starts on the morning he went missing. That's Wednesday, the 15th of May. The newspapers reported that 20 convicted IRA men could go free because of a blunder by scientists. John Marshall, a 35-year-old father of 3, worked from home buying and selling high-performance cars. He was well known in the trade and was on his way to becoming a millionaire. He advertised in Auto Trader and Exchange and Mart, and traded mainly in the Essex and Kent areas.
I've got to nip down to Pitsea to pick up some pieces, then nip down to Kent. But I've got to be back for the dentist in Burns Avenue at 3 o'clock, so I'll see you outside.
On the morning of Wednesday the 15th, he made an arrangement to meet a business associate he needed to give £5,000 to for a car deal.
I'm off, love. I'll see you later.
Oh, bye. John, don't forget we're packing tonight.
John's wife Tony was due to have an operation in London on the Friday, and the couple were intending to spend the Thursday night in a hotel in the capital. John left his house between 10:20 and 11:20 on the Wednesday morning. He was next sighted at the Century Salvage Parts Yard in Pitsea at about midday.
Hello, John. Ain't you sold that motor yet?
Offer me the right price and it's yours.
What can I do for you, mate?
Yeah, I want some spares off that Fiesta.
He bought some parts and a car.
Okay, mate. Cheers.
And left the salvage parts yard sometime between 12 and 1 p.m. He's thought to have headed to Kent on business. This is the last known sighting of John Marshall alive. He'd arranged to meet a business associate at his dentist's in Pitsea at 3 p.m. after his trip to Kent to give him the promised £5,000. The man phoned John's mobile, but he found that he couldn't get through.
The Vodafone you have called may be switched off. Please try later.
We know John couldn't be contacted on his mobile phone after 3 o'clock, but he was at Century Salvage at 12. Now, where was he between 12 and 3? Was there business associates trying to contact him? Did anybody try to meet him? Did he fail to turn up for a meeting? This is what we want to know.
The body was found almost a week later.
John was discovered in Sydenham in the back of his Range Rover, and it was covered in hay. This was on the 22nd of May. The body and the vehicle were there from at least 6:30 a.m. on the 16th of May. We don't believe that John was shot in his vehicle, but he was 6'2" and about 15 stone. Now, he's a big lad. He needed to be lifted by more than one person into the back of that vehicle.
It's unlikely that John was shot near where his car was found. So where was he killed? And who drove the Range Rover down Thorpewood Avenue to where it was discovered in Round Hill?
We believe John's car was dumped either on a Wednesday night or the early hours of Thursday morning. And surprisingly, the £5,000 had been left in the car. John carried a head sports bag, and that contained all his business documents. We don't know when that went missing. It certainly wasn't in the vehicle when we recovered it, but did it go missing after it had been abandoned in Sydenham? Because the vehicle was abandoned with its doors unlocked and a window open. So we're anxious to trace this head bag. Where is it? Did someone see the Range Rover on its way to Sydenham? How many people were in it? Indeed, who was driving it? That's what we want to know.
If you can help, call the incident room at Basildon on 01268 532212. That's 01268 532212. Now, we've had a woman caller from the Sydenham area who phoned in to say that she saw a female driver reversing her car at high speed down the road where John Marshall's Range Rover was parked the day before his body was found. Police are anxious to trace this woman, believed to be aged between 25 and 30.
Okay, so just very quickly breaking that down. Alive, John Marshall is 35 years old. He's a father of 3. He sells high-performance cars. He's well known in the trade, and he's on his way to becoming a millionaire. He advertised in Exchange and Mart, traded mainly in Essex and Kent areas. On the 15th of May, he arranged to meet an associate to give him £5,000 for a car deal. He left home between 10:20 and 11:20 on the morning of the 15th of May. At midday, he was at the parts yard and left sometime between 12 and 1. He headed to Kent for business, and that was the last sighting of John Marshall alive. He had arranged to meet the man with his £5,000 in Pitsea at the dentist. The associate phoned him at 3 o'clock and couldn't get through. In death, he was found on the 22nd of May in Sydenham, London, covered in hay in the back of his Range Rover. The Range Rover and the body had been there from at least 6:30 on the 16th of May. Police don't believe he was shot in his vehicle, and police also believe that there had to be 2 people to put him in the boot. Police don't think that he was shot in the place he was found, so someone must have driven the Range Rover to that spot that he was found in. Police think that the Range Rover was dumped there either Wednesday night or early hours of Thursday morning, with the £5,000 that he was supposed to give to his associate was still in there, still in the glove box. There were things missing from his vehicle. A grey head sports bag, which was mentioned in that video. All his documents were in that bag. From other documents online, also missing were 2 mobile phones and a Patek Philippe 18-carat gold watch with a blue face. We'll get onto those details later so I can show you where I got them from. And finally, a woman was seen reversing at speed in the same road as John's Range Rover the day before that it was found. Now, first of all, let's just pick up this tiny bit here, which I found interesting and probably need to get it off my chest right here, right now. Police think the Range Rover was dumped there either Wednesday night or early hours of the Thursday morning. So it's the 15th and the 16th of May, Wednesday and Thursday. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? That is our days, isn't it? That's in our story. The 6th of December was a Wednesday going into Thursday morning. Very similar happenings here. Police believed that John Marshall's Range Rover was dumped in that road Wednesday night or early hours of Thursday morning. We have theories in our story, don't we, that the Range Rover was dumped. They were killed on Wednesday evening. They were found Thursday morning. So could it be that throughout time, throughout the history of this story, through hearsay and people picking up different bits of information, they've looked into this John Marshall story, they've heard that very thing, that the police believed that it was dumped, and then later on connected it to our story. Interesting, isn't it, to think that this could actually be where that theory's come from. It's come from a completely different Range Rover murder. And because it's a Range Rover murder, people have put 2 and 2 together, come up with 5, or just that Chinese whispers thing. You know, throughout time and history, like I say, a Range Rover murder, somebody heard that it was dumped Wednesday or Thursday, and they thought it was hours from December, when in fact, you know, it was from this one of John Marshall a few months later. Could be, couldn't it? Anyway, let's get on with this. Okay, so he was a dealer in selling high performance cars, and he was well known in the trade in Essex and Kent. And that brings me nicely onto this. Now, this I found online. It's from an unsolved murders site called unsolvedmurders.co.uk, and this is all about John Marshall. Now, all of this that you're reading here on the screen here is a write-up of what I've just said. Basically, you can have a look for yourself. It's more or less a write-up about what I've just said and what's in that video. Here, this is where I got the 2 mobile phone and the Patek Philippe 18 karat gold watch that was missing from. And interestingly, amongst other documents as well, here, what it doesn't mention in that video is this here. It says, the police said that they were interested to find out where John Marshall had been between 12 noon and 3 p.m. It's also been said that he had been a business partner with Pat Tate, a drug dealer, who was found dead with a number of other people in his Range Rover in Rettendon 5 months earlier. However, the police later issued a statement saying that there was no evidence that John Marshall's murder had anything to do with drugs, although they were keeping an open mind. John Marshall was a car dealer and bought and sold high-performance cars and was on his way to becoming a millionaire. Now, the more and more research you do on this man, the more and more you'll notice that keeps popping up. That bit keeps popping up. Now, car dealers in Essex do that. I know that from experience of looking into this case. Barry Dorman, I've been through it in a video that Pat Tate and Barry Dorman were in each other's pocket. They helped each other out because they were car dealers. Pat Tate was involved in car dealing from the age of 19 years old. Barry Dorman was there helping him. And that's just the way it goes with all car dealers. So this man, John Marshall, was into high performance cars. Pat Tate was second-hand cars. Barry Dorman, second-hand prestige cars. And there will be the brand new car dealers, the part exchange car dealers, the recovery dealers, the scrap metal dealers. It's all part and parcel of the same thing, and they will all help each other out. And this is where John Marshall knew Pat Tate, through car dealing. Okay, so moving on, we come to this BBC News article that was dated 14th of July, and it was a Friday of 2000. The heading is "Not Prepared to Go Quietly," and it has the image of Sean Bean, who is a character in the film Essex Boys. The link to this article is down below in the description. If you haven't seen this already, please do go and have a look. There's some other links here on the right hand side with more details of our story. The bit that we're interested in, I'm not going to read this out, but the bit we're interested in is right down the bottom here, where the subheading "Confession Rejected" is. Mr. Bowen said Nichols, who has now been given a new identity and has gone into hiding, has written a book with journalist Tony Thompson called Blogs 19, in which he changes his story once again. Steele and Worms have always denied murder, but in January 1996 another man told police he had been the getaway driver for the real killers. He said they were members of a gang from Canning Town, East London, one of whom, Jesse Gale, died in a car crash in May 1998. Mr. Bowen, who is in the process of making an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, seeking leave to appeal to the Court of Appeal, said he was looking at several other areas which could aid the Rettington 2's case. These include the evidence of the pathologist who told a court she had never been asked to ascertain a time of death and did not think it was important. New evidence by mobile phone expert Dave Bristow, which appears to undermine the police's claim that Worms was in Workhouse Lane when he called Nichols at 7 o'clock. Questions about the death of Billericay car dealer John Marshall, a friend of Tate's who was believed to be looking after £120,000 worth of drug money for him, who was shot dead in his Range Rover 6 months later, and a fellow inmate at the Special Supergrass Unit who has come forward with fresh evidence about Nichols. Okay, so throughout the course of making these videos and people mentioning this man, there's always been that figure in people's comments, in people's minds. 120,000, that kind of varies from 120,000 to 150 grand, 120 most common, 130, 140. You'll have to forgive me, guys. I've looked, I cannot find any other source as to where it comes from that John Marshall held Pat Tate's money. Other than this, I'm going to have to put down the other amounts to Chinese whispers. Starts as 120, makes his way up to 150 through gossip and rumour, but it's always been 120 as far as I can tell. Plus, this is saying it's believed to be, he was a friend of Tate's who is believed to be looking after 120,000 worth of drug money. This is no concrete evidence. However, the BBC have to have got this knowledge from somewhere. They must have got this information from somebody to write it in here. It is out there somewhere, I just can't find it. Where it comes from, I don't know. Anyway, more about that a little bit later. Okay, so let's get on to this next bit. So actually, before we do that, let's just recap. So we've got a 35-year-old man, father of three, a businessman, car dealer, former business partner of Pat Tate, apparently believed to be holding 120 grand for him, has been found dead in his Range Rover, shot through the chest, through the head. Police believe he wasn't shot where the Range Rover was found, so somebody had moved it from where he was shot and dumped it in Sydenham, South London. Obviously, the police then go about their duties and try and solve what happened. It's a whodunit. So who done it? And just for the record, this case has never been solved. Nobody's ever been arrested for it. Nobody's been charged with it ever. It's still an unsolved case. But there are a couple of people who are believed to know, or they are suspects in knowing who and what happened. One of those names is Kenny Noy, and the second, we'll get on to him in a minute. Kenny Noy is a criminal who's just got out of prison for murdering Stephen Cameron on the M25. This article is from The Guardian, written by Tony Thompson. Now, Tony Thompson, just very quickly, is the author of Blogs 19. Blogs 19 is Darren Nichols' book. The link to this is in the description below if you haven't already read it, and if you can't be bothered to listen to me, click it and go read it yourself. I'm reading it out for the people who can't read properly, can't read it because of their screens, can't find the glasses, whatever. I'll do my best anyway. It's titled Noy Linked to More Killings. The M25 road rage murderer could have ordered at least 3 gangland deaths whilst on the run. Tony Thompson reports on a brutal life of crime which began at the age of 3. Kenneth Noy, sentenced to life imprisonment for the M25 road rage murder of Stephen Cameron last week, is believed to have ordered at least 3 gangland killings in the time between Cameron's death and his own extradition to Britain, the Observer can reveal. Detectives now believe that South London car dealer John Marshall, found shot dead in his Range Rover a few days after Noy had fled the country in May 1996, was murdered in cold blood to prevent a link being made between Noy and the car he was driving at the time he stabbed Cameron. Marshall had supplied Noy with false papers and number plates showing that the killer's Land Rover Discovery was owned by an Anthony Francis. Marshall was about to be visited by police trying to track down the vehicle. Underworld sources say that Noy, fearing his true identity would be revealed, ordered him to be silenced. Marshall's murder is still unsolved. Oh, good. My apologies there. I thought that went on and on and on about John Marshall. However, it doesn't. Saves me, getting into trouble. This is all we need to know about this. I thought this was a little bit longer than that. Actually, it's not. The rest of it is going into Kenny Noy's life and more about the M25 murder he has gone on. I've just had a little flick through it. I should have done that in the first place, sorry, but let's have a look. Is there's anything else? No, I don't think there's anything else in here of interest to us, so I'm not going to read this for obvious reasons, because this, personally, actually, honestly, I'm not sure if I'm going to trust it, first of all, because of that Tony Thompson author who's authored this. I'm just not feeling this for some reason because of that name. If it was anybody else, I would actually be interested, but because of that name and because of that book that he's written for Darren Nichols, I'm just not feeling it for some reason. That, as well as it's about Kenny Noy, and nobody wants to rub Kenny up the wrong way. I don't, and I'm sure that nobody else would either. This isn't accusing Kenny Noy. This isn't saying that Kenny Noy has done this. It's believed. The police believe that that John Marshall was ordered by Kenny to be silenced because of the documents he had for the car that he was driving whilst he stabbed and killed Stephen Cameron. So to that effect, that's basically saying John Marshall, the car dealer, made plans for Kenny Noy, also known as Anthony Francis, to have this car, this Range Rover, and Kenny Noy used it and was involved in that ruckus on the M25, which ended in the loss of life of Stephen Cameron. Kenny Noy, for obvious reasons, if you think about that, is obviously going to need all evidence extinguished. Part of that evidence is that vehicle. Wherever that vehicle come from, there's a paper trail. That paper trail can lead to Kenny Noy, can't it? Which brings me nicely onto this next bit, the dates of all of this. Okay, so here you're hearing the M25 road rage murder of Stephen Cameron. Now, this is well known and well documented that it was Kenny Noy who killed him. Okay, now I've said that on purpose. This could not have been Kenny Noy. It could not have been Kenny Noy ordering the death of John Marshall because he has documents linking him to the road rage murder of Stephen Cameron. It cannot. It's impossible. The dates. Stephen Cameron was killed on the 19th of May. John Marshall here was killed on the 15th. He was found on the 22nd. How can Kenny Noy order the killing of John Marshall for having documents linking him to the death that hasn't even happened yet. This is online in the story of John Marshall, and it can't be trusted. It cannot be trusted. This author, Tony Thompson, cannot be trusted. It's absolutely physically impossible for Kenny Noye to be linked in the death of John Marshall for what he's saying. I mean, obviously there could be links in other places, other areas, for whatever, you know, for any other. But this man here is clearly stating that the police say that he was murdered because of the documents of the car. John Marshall was already dead when Stephen Cameron was murdered. So it's a lie. It's false. It's false fabrication. Okay, so forevermore you can now go away knowing that this is a lie and shouldn't be trusted whatsoever. Okay, so now we know that the link between John Marshall's murder and Kenny Noye can't be true. So, as I said earlier, there is another suspect, or there was another suspect in this, and he goes by the name of Bernard O'Mahony. Bernard O'Mahony was a suspect in the John Marshall murder. Now, again, you'll have to forgive me because I don't know if this is legitimate or official, and by official I mean by the police, whether he was suspected for this murder. He was, however, suspected by somebody, and that somebody being the person who wrote this document. I am going to be going through this document at a later date, but it was on Bernie's old site, and it was uploaded by Bernie. So with that said, and with this document in it, you can either believe it or take it with a pinch of salt. It has to be your call on what you believe. This document's titled Document Sent to John Worms. I have been through it before. I put it up as one of those videos where you read it yourself. And actually I thought the two in that title was wrong and it should be for or from. Like document sent from John Worms or document sent for John Worms. Something like that. But I just thought that title was wrong. But as it's progressed, document sent to John Worms would suggest that it's an official document from an authority that's looked into the case, and these are the findings of. And it's regarding Bernard O'Mahony as the Rettendon murder suspect. And you know the score with this. We can't just throw the chips and let them lie where they lie with this subject, because the man in question is still alive. He has feelings. He's been through all of this. He has a legal team. He has people around looking and watching, I think, about what people say, and they're high up in tackling slander and libel issues. So my disclaimer here is that I am not pointing fingers. I am not making any of this up. This is a document from the man himself's own site. So see into that what you will. I am merely the messenger here. It's a great document, and as I say, I'm going to be going through it in another video. It's on my to-do list. But the points of interest for us is the John Marshall story. So here, from here onwards, I'm going to be reading out, and it goes into detail about Bernie being the suspect. So it starts, O'Mahony was at South Woodham Ferris Police Station from midday until 3 p.m. The Leicestershire officers then went to O'Mahony's home to see some paperwork relating to Danny Marlowe's debt. Just to be clear, Danny Marlowe is somebody who they're speaking about prior to this. May the 12th, 1996, Worms and Steele are arrested. May the 15th, 1996, John Marshall, Tate's ex-partner, goes missing. O'Mahony to New Marshall. He occasionally recovered debts. For Marshall. What is odd about the Marshall murder is the fact that Detective Superintendent Gamble of Basildon Police was given the task of investigating it. Yet the police are adamant there is no link between it and the Rettendon murders. It's accepted Marshall was murdered in Kent, and he was found in his abandoned Range Rover in Sydenham, southeast London. Why would Basildon Police be asked to investigate a crime committed in Kent if there was no link? The police, despite not solving the case, are adamant that Marshall was not involved in drugs. We have learnt that this is either a result of poor police work or a deliberate attempt to cover up the truth. Marshall was heavily involved in drugs, and he traded on occasion with his close, long-life friend and business partner, Pat Tate. Gary Russo, another man who went into business with Marshall selling cars, quit the partnership when he learnt of Marshall's drug dealing activities. We've learnt from affidavits filed in a civil case involving Mr. Russo. Both O'Mahony and Russo were questioned by detectives about the Marshall murder. It goes without saying, both interviews were informal. Gary Russo can be contacted at Essex Ford Car Sales, Cherry Down, Basildon, Essex, where he works as a car salesperson. 01268 522 744. Basildon Evening Echo, Friday, May the 24th, 1996, page 8. Detective Superintendent Mike Gamble appears in the paper appealing for information about a grey head sports bag missing from Mr. Marshall's car. The sports bag was never found. The motive for taking it never established. Marshall's murder certainly wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Marshall had left £5,000 in cash on the dashboard, which his killers chose to ignore. Nearly £2,000 in cash was left on the victims at Rettendon. What did Marshall have in that bag that was more valuable than £5,000 in ready cash? Could it have been the proceeds of a deal involving the Rettendon trio? The evidence was there in the back of the Range Rover at Rettendon. Police found an empty, identical head sports bag discarded in the boot. Whatever it contained was gone. We doubt if police tested it for traces of drugs. They knew what they may have found, and the link between Rettendon and Marshall would have been forged. They would have had to let Steele and Wombs go. Mark Hall, a doorman who worked for O'Mahony and Tucker at Rackhouse, used to work for Parcel Force, delivering packages and parcels. Hall couldn't resist taking items for himself or to sell to his fellow doorman. One such haul was a consignment of sports bags, which were sold on and distributed through the door staff at Rackhouse. Tucker, O'Mahony, Marshall and Rolfe all had at least one. On January the 9th, 1996, in a joint operation between Essex Police and the Internal Parcel Force Security Department, Hall was arrested. At his home, they found stolen parcels and cocaine and cannabis, which Hall later claimed was for his personal use. He was successfully prosecuted by Parcel Force, but surprisingly, not by the Essex Police. We don't know when exactly, but we're told that Hall arranged to meet O'Mahony in the weeks after his arrest at a car park in Pitsea, Essex. We don't know what the two discussed. A feature linking O'Mahony and Marshall's murder, never pursued by the police, as far as we know, is the fact Marshall's Range Rover, with his body still inside, was dumped in Round Hill, Upper Sydenham, South East London. This is less than 1 mile from O'Mahony's London flat in Cowden Street, London, SE6, number not known. The link emphasises the concern about O'Mahony's movement on the night of the Rettendon murders and the day of the bodies were found. O'Mahony admits to being in London early in the morning on the day the Rettendon trio were found. He admits he spent the whole day walking around London aimlessly, which seems unlikely at best. We don't know where he spent the night of the murders, nor do we know if he spent any time with Marshall in the area his body was found and the area O'Mahony supposedly spends a lot of time, wandering aimlessly. We also know O'Mahony had a sports bag with him when the police met him off the train on the day the Rettendon murders were discovered. The first thing O'Mahony did when the police walked up to him was offer the sports bag to the detectives to be searched. Why? We can only speculate because the police chose not to investigate. But we know O'Mahony was asked by Tucker and Tate to act as a backup driver in a big drug deal robbery. We only have O'Mahony's word that he turned their offer down. We know from his track record that it was an unusual decision for O'Mahony to take, particularly as he was floundering financially at the time. We know from O'Mahony their robbery was both successful and lucrative. This was obviously not the alleged deal Nichols talks of in his Dud cannabis evidence. We know the Rettendon trio were threatening to shoot O'Mahony. We know in turn he was never concerned or the type of man one should threaten. We know he was in Rettendon within 30 minutes of the murders being committed. We know none of these men, who were deeply paranoid, kept anything involved in drugs in their home. He, O'Mahony, replied, 6 times you lot have searched my house. There's nothing there. Could Tate's loyal, trusted friend John Marshall have held part or all of the heist from the drug robbery to prevent the police, who were crawling all over the trio and O'Mahony following Leah's death, from hiding it? Part, all, or none of that heist may have been recovered by the killers at Rettendon from the bag found in their Range Rover. We only know it was empty. Fearing for his own safety, Marshall may have called a meeting to return the trio's ill-gotten gains, but Marshall would have known too much, and he was silenced when he arrived with the sports bag containing the goods. Evening Echo, 25th of April 1997, page 20. Drugs author living in fear. O'Mahony confesses he is living in fear and states, I couldn't stay in Basildon or anywhere else in Essex for that matter. He goes on to say there are people who would like to see the back of him because of what he's said and done. He also lies about his whereabouts, saying he's living near Portsmouth. Why? 1.5 years later, after the deaths of the Rettendon trio, does O'Mahony clearly believe there are people who want to see him dead? We know he's concerned about Tucker's friends. He went to see them after the murders at the Southend nightclub, Club Art. We know nobody but the Rettendon trio had a problem with O'Mahony. Unless there was something he hadn't disclosed in his book, it's possible O'Mahony did take up Tucker and Tate's offer to take part in the robbery. Is that why he's in fear? Is that why he was given armed police protection? Okay, so that is basically all we need to know from this document. And basically, whoever this is from, and whoever's written this, is, in a nutshell, basically accusing their own thoughts to be consistent of Bernard O'Mahony being guilty in some manner and or involved in some form in the death of John Marshall. They're talking about the distance and the area that John Marshall was found is very close to Bernie's home at that point. It's a little bit spooky, isn't it, that Bernard O'Mahony was involved in all of this and he lived a mile away from John Marshall's dumped Range Rover there. In walking distance, you could walk that in 15 minutes. John Marshall was apparently there for nearly 7 days, and Bernie was there, right in the middle of it again. So we've got some great details there. Bernard O'Mahony used to recover debts for John Marshall. John Marshall, as we know, is this high-end car dealer. He's this lucrative, high-performance car dealer. And so you can imagine being high-performance cars, very expensive, and it's inevitable, isn't it, really, that people are going to fall behind with their payments and they're not going to want to pay for their cars, whatever. You know, people getting into this field of expertise, you know, drugs and all that, you know, the wanting these cars, easy money, easy spending, getting this, you know, the deposits or whatever for these high-end cars, can't pay the money, so obviously the debt collectors are called. Those debt collectors consisted of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker, Bernard O'Mahony. They were all in it together. So John Marshall being ex-partner of Pat Tate, you know, he is pretty much protected. You can more or less guarantee, especially in 1995, even with Pat Tate in prison, John Marshall was well protected. You know, he's got a good set of friends there. Any problems, phone Pat. Pat's there. Any problems for Pat, then there's Tucker. And then Tucker and Bernie and Craig. It's a mad little circle of friends. Okay, so you remember at the start when I said that there was two ends to this spectrum. There are the people who believe John Marshall was involved in drugs, and then there's obviously coming a little bit later is the story that he wasn't. This is it. This is where it comes from, that he was heavily involved in drugs. And the contrast there, look. The police, despite not solving the case, are adamant that Marshall wasn't involved in drugs. But this person who has written this said that he was heavily involved in it. He traded on occasion, and he was friends with Pat Tate. Say no more, basically. But more frequently than not, the mention of this grey head sports bag missing from John Marshall's vehicle is mentioned. Now, the police really need to find this bag. They want to find this bag because they believe that there is important information in there. You know, if they find that bag, they find what happened, basically. I would imagine that's what they're going along with. But the author of this is saying that Marshall's murder certainly wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It's hard to distinguish whether they believe it was a robbery at all, although there were things missing from John Marshall himself. His gold watch had gone, 2 mobile phones had gone, plus this bag. You know, but they're saying that on the premise that the £5,000 that was left, the £5,000 was left in the car. Now, personally, I'm not feeling anything about this £5,000 being left in there as a bit of any suspicion, to be fair. In that video, it said that it was in the glove box. You see him put it into this little compartment down by the gear stick. I don't know what it's called. It's a little box, isn't it? Armrest. This here is saying that it was on the dashboard. Personally, I'm not buying that it was on the dashboard in clear view. I may be wrong, but in that video it does show you that he puts it in that little holding place on the armrest. If it was in there and not in plain view, it would suggest that it just wasn't found. But that's just my own personal opinion. I'm more than sure if they found it, then yeah, they would have taken it. But yeah, I don't know about that. This head bag, they're saying that there were a load of head bags going round in Essex at this point, and it came from a dealer who used to sell things on the doors of Raquel's, and one of the consignments that came in were head bags, sports bags, and they all had one. Bernie had one, Marshall had one, Craig had one, Tucker had one, even Mick had one, actually. If you think about it, they found a head bag at Mick's in his garage. Honestly, don't know how relevant that is. But this document is saying that the Range Rover in Rettendon with Tony Pound Craig, it had an identical head sports bag in the boot. Identical to that of John Marshall. Again, I don't know how they've come around to find that out. Maybe his wife has identified it, you know, being shown pictures of it and, you know, identified it, and then the police have put 2 and 2 together and actually made 4 this time. They're identical. Apparently they were identical. But this document is asking that question. It's asking the question, isn't it? There was a drug deal at Rettendon. Could it be that John Marshall was involved in that deal? And could it be that John Marshall on the 15th of May had made an arrangement with somebody to return the proceeds of that drug deal from Rettendon? That's basically the bottom line of all this. And in fact, it's suggesting that they think it was Bernie. You know, it's suspicious that Bernie was in the area. Not beating around the bush, that's basically what it's saying, isn't it? Well, it is to me anyway. This whole little bit is suggesting that the person writing it thinks it was Bernie. Or Bernie was linked somehow to it. Is there any flavour in there, though? Is there any flavour in that question? Could John Marshall have been there that night, involved in the deal that did go down? Well, the answer is yes. Okay, moving on to the next bit. Just before we do, this is a head bag, okay? There's some confusion out there, and quite understandably so, because some people actually think that a head bag is a type of bag. Understandably, the confusion comes from, you know, there are shoulder bags, backpacks, handbags. I believe some people are trying to work out what a head bag is. Well, Head is the actual make. It's the brand. It's the brand of. It's not an actual type of bag. Head is the brand. Just in case you're one of those people who are confused with that, there you go. That's the logo of Head. And they've specifically made sports bags, holdalls, just like that one you see on your screen. I hope that clears that up. Okay, so this is the Range Rover of question here. This is John Marshall's Range Rover, his black Range Rover. He was found dead in it, in the boot, and his body was covered in hay in there. Just very quickly, something that's hitting my mind whilst talking about this and trying to revise what happened. We're looking at where was John Marshall between 12 and 3 o'clock. That's the last time he was seen alive. Now, obviously, I personally don't know if there was hay in the back of his Range Rover anyway. He's not a farmer. Why would he have hay in there? Which, personally, my thoughts on that is that he went somewhere to a field, possibly, or a farm. It would suggest, wouldn't it, that the straw wasn't, the hay wasn't already in there, you know, to kill a man, then open the boot to take the hay out, to put him in, to put the hay back in. You know, all seems a bit too much for somebody, a murderer, you know what I mean, or a couple of murderers. They don't want that. You know, it would seem that it's a setup. You know, it's being set up that when he arrives, we'll kill him, put him in the boot, and stick this on the top of him. You know, and then get rid of the car. That's what it would suggest to me anyway. You know me, I'll have to get these things off my chest. Okay, well, first of all, as you can see on your screen, this is his Range Rover. It's black. But the important thing here, and the most interesting thing, I don't know if you will find this interesting, but it's the grills on the lights. He's got grills on his lights. It's a Range Rover with grills on his light. Without question, it's the same model. It's the same model as ours in our story. The difference here is that it's the colour and it's got grills on the lights. And obviously, if you're following these videos, you know that that's very interesting, because we have a sighting of a Range Rover going into Workhouse Lane at 6:50, 7 o'clock by somebody called Raymond Wright. He's the one who made this statement. As you can see there, highlighted yellow is the tiny bit of interest. He says that, we'll go from here, he says, I slowly caught up with the vehicles in front, but I had to brake quite heavily in the end because I had to anticipate that the vehicle would be turning into the farm. I then stopped in the line of traffic, and I believed I was 2 or 3 cars from the front of the line. I believe I was stationary for approximately 10 seconds when an oncoming vehicle left a gap for the vehicle that was turning right to cut across the traffic. As it did, I could see that the vehicle was a 4x4 vehicle, and because of the shape of the rear of the vehicle and the grille over the lights, over the rear lights, my immediate reaction was that it was a Range Rover. I believe that the vehicle was dark in colour, and I think possibly green. I don't know why. I think there was at least 3 people in the vehicle, and I think there may have been 4. Okay, now there's going to be some argument there about the colour. Look what he's saying here. He's saying he was 2 or 3 cars from the front of this line that had stopped. Okay, and he was there for about 10 seconds. Okay, then just out of nowhere, this vehicle turns in from this front of the line. The cars on the other side stop so that this vehicle can go in. He goes in. He says that he thinks it was dark. It was a dark coloured vehicle, possibly green. Possibly green. It doesn't say it is green. Possibly green. But he was 2 or 3 cars back from it. It's pitch black dark. The only lights that are going to be shining in that direction are car lights, artificial lights. All I'm saying is that this vehicle that passed, because of the car lights the actual vehicle up, it could construe that it was a colour, but it could have been black. I'm not clutching at straws there. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Hopefully you do too. This could have been a black vehicle crossing the road. This bloke may have thought it was green because of the lights that were shining on it. That's what I'm saying. And of course, you know, this is all speculation and guesswork, but Could this have been John Marshall? Absolutely yes, it could have been. It could have been a black Range Rover with grills on the lights. It's got grills on the lights, and John Marshall's had grills on its lights. Right, now this is a very interesting shot from the video that we saw earlier, and this is the back end of the replica Range Rover that they're using for this documentary in this little crime watch thing that they're doing here. Very interesting that. Just wanted to pick that up to show you. There's actually grills on the back of this black Range Rover here. Now look at the colour of that. Look at the colour. It's a black Range Rover, that is. And doesn't it look green? I mean, I'm not making this up. It looks brown or green to me. Greenish. But I wanted to just pick up that as well. There's a green Range Rover here that they've planted as a prop look. Well, two. One green Land Rover Discovery and a green Range Rover right there. That's quite an interesting little picture, that is. But sticking with this Range Rover here of interest, I'm just trying to prove a point that, look, even right this close, look, it's a black Range Rover, but the colours can change. And very interestingly, it's got grills on the back of the lights. That should be classed as irrelevant. These are only props, don't forget. And in fact, the front of this Range Rover doesn't have those grills on the lights, so it's not an exact replica. But I do know for these Crime Watch programs, they do try to replicate things as well as possible. And look, well, you know, isn't that telling a story itself? You know, this is the bit here. Let me just play this bit.
John Marshall, a 35-year-old father of three, worked from home buying and selling high-performance cars.
Now, if you listen carefully here to what she's saying, right, she actually says that he works from home selling cars. Now, I don't know if this is John Marshall's real home. It could be, you know, it could be on the favour of his wife, Tony, that they use the actual property. It's all about jogging people's memory, this is, isn't it? It's all about trying to... It's a reconstruction of the events that happened that day. So this could actually be John Marshall's real home with real props. You don't know. Listen to what she says.
5-year-old father of three worked from home buying and selling high...
This number plate, for example, is the exact number plate. That's his number plate. I just want to make the impression correct for you. This is exact... replica, bar these grills on the lights, the front grills, I mean. Unfortunately, the photos that we've got of John Marshall's car doesn't actually show us the back, but it shows us the front. They've got grills on the front. I would imagine that it's got them on the back, absolutely. So, could it be that John Marshall has driven down to be part of this deal in Rettendon, as that document from Bernie's old site suggests? I would say absolutely yes. Right, now, you know me. I've got to get this off my chest. It's a theory. It's a brand new theory that has popped up on this basis that John Marshall was involved here. Okay, now listen to this. We all think Tony, Pat and Craig were going down to rob these people of their drugs. Why? Because they did it to other people. John Marshall is holding £120,000 for Pat Tate. This deal is worth £1 million. Could it be that they weren't robbing them? It was one of their deals. John Marshall comes along with Pat's money. Pat trusts John Marshall. There's that trust thing. There's that link. They were taken down there by somebody they trusted. John Marshall's taking Pat's money to pay for it. There was never a robbery. There was never going to be a robbery. The only people who know that it wasn't going to be a robbery are dead. So, with that said, all these people who are suggesting that they were down there to rob somebody, couldn't that be just a fabrication? A fabrication because they robbed Tony, Pat and Craig of their drugs and their money. All this time we believe that Tony, Pat and Craig were down there to rob. And we think that because of what Donna Jaggers says. Donna Jaggers said that they were just gonna... Mick Steele, the one who's denied all of this, denied that that ever happened. The one who denies everything about this and said that none of that happened is the one who apparently has suggested that they rob these people. The person it's come from of this robbery is Mick Steele, and he denies it. He always says no, that didn't happen. So for some reason though, we all think it still did happen. Yeah, it was still definitely there. It still absolutely did happen. Yeah, Mick set that up. Mick set it up that there was going to be a robbery. Craig told Donna that. And then it all happened that night. It all happened and went down as Mick had suggested it would. Mick said, absolutely no, fuck off. That is bullshit. I didn't do that. None of that happened. But we all, for some reason, think, yeah, it did. Why? Why isn't it possible that Tony Pound Craig were buying drugs? They were buying them. 120 grand from Pat Tate is about right for his share in £1 million drug deal. Could it be that they were paying 125? They were paying £1 million between them all. Pat's 120 grand. John Marshall's here. He's on his way to become a millionaire. We've got Tony Tucker, who's also a millionaire. Mick Steele could have been in on it. You never know. He is a millionaire. All of these people's money together to buy £1 million worth of cocaine there in that lane. John Marshall's turned up with Pat's money. Pat's share. There's another head bag full of money in the back of the Range Rover. Our Range Rover. So they all get there. This is the meeting place. This is just where it's going to be. It may actually be coming in an aeroplane. They may actually be landing. They haven't got any guns. It suggests, doesn't it, that they were all safe. This has happened 1 million times. They always do this thing. There's been some ruckus before regarding other drugs. You know, there's been some misunderstandings over there about the ecstasy, and you know they're robbing people left, right and centre, but they still bought them and they still doubt them. They're still involved in them. Why is it that people are continually thinking that they were out to rob this consignment of drugs? It all comes from Donna Jaggers. Of course, this is only a theory, and the questions I'm not putting forward to you, obviously I'm too in there believing that story that they were there to rob. But why can't it be that they weren't there to rob, that they were there to buy into a drug deal? They were there to buy £1 million worth, to then obviously chop it all up and make their own bits. Do you know what I mean? It's a possibility, isn't it? We've got this sighting of a dark Range Rover pulling into the lane at 6:50, 7 o'clock. Got grills on the lights. John Marshall is holding Pat's money. His drug money, apparently, as well. Does make sense to me. Anyway, it's just another theory. Could it have been John Marshall that pulled into that lane? Absolutely, yes. Does it make sense that he did that? Yes. How will it have gone down if that's the case? If John Marshall was there, then it can only be construed that he was taking something there. He was taking Pat his money, possibly, and they were just buying into it. Can you see what I'm saying? Then there was a massive consignment, £1 million worth of cocaine, plus Pat's 120 grand, plus Tucker's 120 grand. There's another £250,000 there, you know, between Pat and Tony. However much Craig's put in. And Tony Pound Craig got robbed and killed. Not because they were robbing it, but because they are fuckers. Because they've been robbing people left, right and centre. They think they can rob these people, get away with it, and then go off and do their own dealing. Robbing people over there of their 100 grand's worth of drugs, right? And selling it for their own profits. So isn't it likely that all that's just going to come back on you anyway? These people who are in that lane, bang, 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 fuck you. You know how this story goes. You do it. You're out of here. They've robbed them the money. They've robbed the cocaine. Makes sense. John Marshall was there in his Range Rover. John Marshall then has got all this knowledge. You see what I'm saying? He's got all this knowledge of what happened. He's the only person who's got all this knowledge. He's involved in it. He gets rid of them as well. He shuts his mouth. He gets a bit of his share in it. He gets his cocaine. He gets his a share of the money as well. John Marshall thinks he's all right then. You know, trusted. Always well trusted. He just leaves. Whoever was there, whoever shot Tony Patton Craig is then left with that dilemma, isn't he? Right, John Marshall knows all this. John Marshall knows far too much. Shit. He's got to go as well. So, it comes down to it that on this day, 15th of March, Mick Steele, Jack Wholmes are being arrested. Have been arrested. The day before. Can you believe that? The day before, Mick Steele and Jack Wholmes have been arrested. It could be like that's gone, holy shit, oh my god, sorry John. You're the only other person involved in this. Fuck. They've been nicked. They're going to get done for the murder now. Fuck, shit. Now what do I do? John, come here. Quick. I need you. Meet me in the field. Yeah, of course. Bring those documents. Bring everything you know. Bring me that bag. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Comes down, drops it off like good bloke. Bang, bang, you're dead. Puts him in the back of this Range Rover and dumps him. Mick Steele, Jack Wholmes are in prison, likely to go to prison for these murders. It takes everything off the actual murderer, doesn't it? John Marshall's dead. Tony Patton Craig are now dead. The only people who know anything about all of this, thankfully, are dead. John Marshall was the last chink in the chain. He's dead. Who was that murderer? That's the question. I just had to get off my chest. That's my thoughts on that bit. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so at the beginning you will have heard me mention a contrast. Some people in society say John Marshall was heavily involved in drugs. Some say he wasn't. Mainly his family say he wasn't, and this is an article that proves it. This is an article from John Marshall's brother. It's a news article and it was made on the 17th of May 1999. Funnily enough, just around the anniversary of John Marshall's death. Titled Little Bursted, Clear My Murdered Brother. The brother of murdered John Marshall, accused of being a drug dealer, has broken a 3-year silence in an attempt to clear his name. Angry Stuart Marshall said he had chosen to speak out in frustration that his brother's death is being linked to drugs. Car dealer John, 35, from Little Bursted, was found shot dead in his Range Rover 3 years ago after driving to Kent to finalise arrangements for a house he was buying. Because John had previously been business partners with drug pusher Pat Tate, discovered dead in a Range Rover in Rettendon 5 months earlier, police immediately linked the two. Stewart said the police spent the first 3 months investigating the drugs link because it was just after and so similar to the Rettendon murders. But then the police issued a statement saying John's murder had nothing to do with drugs. But 2 weeks ago, one of the national newspapers printed an article on people murdered by hitmen alongside a piece on Jill Dando. The story said John was a drug dealer, and that's just lies. It's about time the truth was told. We're just starting to put all this behind us and try to get on with our lives, and now it's all flared up again. He added that Tony John's wife had been left fuming by the allegations resurfacing, and the couple's children, Tyron 10, Kiana 5 and Keir 16, had been taunted at school. Stewart, a 31-year-old insurance claims investigator from Luton, said last week they're taking a lot of flack. The kids were really young at the time, but now they're coming home and saying, what's this about Dad being a drug dealer? It's hard for Tony to explain it to the kids. It's ironic that this is flared up when the 3rd anniversary of his death's coming up tomorrow. Oh, there you go. Stewart said his brother couldn't have been further from a stereotypical drug dealer. He said he was someone who was at home by 6:30 every evening to play with his kids. Does that sound like a drug dealer? There's no evidence he had anything to do with drugs, and we just want to make it clear he wasn't a dealer. This has caused the family a lot of stress. My mother had 5 heart attacks last year, and it's all been brought back to her. The police said last year that there was nothing to suggest that John was anything other than an honest businessman whose worst crimes were dodging the taxman and smoking a bit of cannabis. His business deals rarely involved money changing hands. He would swap cars for work to his home or swimming pool in his back garden. Officers revealed John's partnership with Tate had broken up because John wouldn't stand for the dealer's behaviour. Appealing, Stuart Marshall denies his brother had anything to do with drug dealing. Okay, so again, this is one of those places where you just have to make your own mind. What do you think? Is it that he was this more sinister character, or wasn't he? Do you accept the word of this document that has surfaced up on Bernard O'Mahony's old site, who suggests that he was? That's the only source that says he absolutely was involved. Or do you believe that bit there? That bit is his brother saying he wasn't a drug dealer, you know, and that's more or less all he says. He wasn't. I want to make this clear. He wasn't. The bottom line of this, he wasn't a drug dealer. He's not actually coming across to me as quite persuasive there in his power. Understandably, he wants to put it all behind him. The whole family does, which is great, and I wish them luck. And I send my condolences for their loss. But, you know, at the end of the day, was he, wasn't he? Who knows? Whoever's written that article for that document on Bernard's site is adamant that he was. You know, he was most definitely linked to Pat Tate. And without question, Pat Tate was quite a persuasive character. Open about what he was doing. And if this man is holding money for Pat Tate, then, you know, it's likely that he absolutely knew what he was up to and was involved somehow. But again, the source of that 120 grand is only that one little bit of newspaper article, which there has to be something else. I can't find it. But if that is the only source, then, you know, it is like a 50-50 thing, isn't it? That, you know, can it be really true? That how would they know that if there isn't any other source? Do you understand what I mean? There has to be something else. They've been tipped off or something for it to get in the paper. So it's believed that he was holding all that, which would suggest, wouldn't it, that he was involved in the drug side of things if he's looking after Pat Tate's money. Again, you'll have to make your own mind up. Right, now we come to the final bit of this video. I hope you've enjoyed this. And we finish with this nice little bit, actually. Well, depending on how you look at it. John Marshall was a very well-known man. He was well-known and he was well-liked. This you're seeing on your screen is a news article from an actual newspaper. And it's saying that the actor Bill Murray, who at this point in time was from ITV's The Bill, but he's also been in EastEnders as Johnny Allen. I don't know if anybody realises that or knows who he is. He also played Mick Steele in Rise of the Foot Soldier. And this is him you're seeing on your screen, this geezer. Actor Billy Murray. Unfortunately, I can't read what it says in this article because it's all a bit too small and I don't want to mislead anybody. But the bottom line here, I mean, I can see little bits of it. It says that the TV cop Don Beach broke down in tears as he gave an emotional reading at the funeral of his murdered car dealer pal John Marshall yesterday. Actor Bill Murray, star of ITV's The Bill, was there with 300 mourners. He was a family man, and he had 3 children. Friends and family were filmed by police from a surveillance van as they were led into Basildon's St Bastille's Church for the funeral service. Then it goes on into... I can't read the rest of it. It's all a bit too close. This is actually a still from a video, and I can't really read it. This is just a picture building thing, I suppose, at the end of this video of who he was. He was a very well-liked man. Okay, so now, if you can imagine now where he came from and what he was doing. Luxury cars. Luxury prestige cars. Okay, that is attractive to all kinds of different people from all higher, different types of hierarchies, isn't it? Actors, you know, the rich, the famous, the drug dealers, I suppose you could say. Don't forget, we've got Nigel Benn in here as well. Rich, famous. This man deals in luxury cars. So, being Pat Tate's mate, contacts with Tony Tucker, contacts with the rich and famous, this Billy Murray. Apparently he gets around a bit, this Billy Murray. Bits about him. How he was arguing with different people and different characters from play. I don't know the whole story though. I might look into that. But he does get around. Wasn't there an argument or something between he and Carlton Leach or something like that? This is proof that he was there. He was good friends with this man. He was good friends with John Marshall, which is interesting, isn't it? And there's a close-up of that picture there. That there, I believe, is Billy Murray. Or that one there, the second one. I can't make out any other face that I recognise. It's that front one or that second one there. But very well liked man. 300 people. 300 people is a lot for a funeral. And this is a more common sighting of John Marshall. This is the police picture, I think it is, that's actually used in different newspaper clippings and articles and videos. More commonly used photograph, that is. And this is another photo of John Marshall. Looks a little bit different there. I wouldn't recognise that man. If somebody asked me if this man was John Marshall from previous photographs, I would say no. Doesn't look like it. It's got ginger hair for one. But this has come from a friend of John Marshall's who actually made that video of the Crime Watch video. This is at the end of that, if you want to go and have a look at that. And this is his obituary that was either in a newspaper or I would suggest it was at the funeral. I think probably be best to put it that way, so they probably used it in either one. Our mate, John Marshall, our mate will be missed in more than one way. His laughing and joking would cheer up our day. Hard in a deal, but steadfast and true. You knew where you stood when he dealt with you. The toss of a coin, the slap of a hand, a deal was a deal, and on that he would stand. As white is white and black is black, out of a deal he'd never backtrack. Win, lose or draw, whatever the way, he was a man that would always pay. If your family and friends were ever in need, he was a friend to come there in speed. Our mate will be missed in more ways than one. The 20th of June is a very sad day. R.I.P. from your mates, Michael Andrew, David Royston, Matthew, Jamie, Barry East, Chris Wallace, Andy King, Paul Privet, Dave, Michael Beacon, Michael Dobson, Wally Birch, Billy Murray and Les Wassell. That sums up what his mates think of John Marshall. And I don't know, however you cut that, they're talking about dealing. They're talking about being a dealer. I know how ironic that sounds, but they are talking about the whole obituary there is about dealing. All jokes aside, it's not the time for a joke and a laugh about this, but they are, aren't they? They're talking about him dealing, about him being a dealer. Hard in a deal, but steadfast and true. You knew where he stood when he dealt with you. The whole thing is about him dealing. A toss of a coin, slap of a hand, a deal was a deal. And on that he would stand. As white is black is black, out of a deal he'd never backtrack. Win, lose or draw, whatever the way, he was the man that would always pay. So, he was a car dealer. very, very similar to Pat Tate. If you think about it, car dealer. You know, I daren't say it. I'm trying to hold back in saying it. That, you know, drug dealer, but I don't know what I believe. If he was a drug dealer, look how alike it is to being Pat Tate. You know, the lifestyle, the drugs, possibly everything that Pat Tate wanted to be, if you know what I mean. The kind of car dealer Pat Tate would love to have been. Probably more suited to what Pat Tate should have been or could have been, you know what I mean? But overall, these are two very, very similar Range Rover murders. We've got the triple murder over there, one Range Rover, drugs, 3 men found in a car. And we've got this one here in London, a Range Rover murder, another person found in a car. They're both Range Rover murders. They're both got car dealers in there. They all knew each other. How ironic that is. You know, how spooky it is. Everything down to the days. Wednesday going into Thursday. Ours was Wednesday going into Thursday. John Marshall was dumped in his Range Rover. Ours, we've got this same theory of it being dumped. We don't know, do we? In all honesty, overall, all the theories that are going down with Tony Pan Craig could be just mistaken for this one 5 months later from John Marshall, couldn't it? Let's be serious. Anyway, one last thought from me. This wouldn't be my video if you didn't get that. This Range Rover with lights, with grills on the lights, was seen pulling into this lane with 4 people in. Could that have been John Marshall, Tony Pan Craig? Think about that. At 5:45, Pat Tate was seen in a blue Range Rover going down that road towards White House Lane following a Sierra. Earlier that day, they were with somebody called Peter Cuthbert. In that, there's proof that they leave their vehicle alone whilst they go off with other people. Peter Cuthbert was picked up and then took them all out somewhere, and if you remember that statement, he takes them to Chafford 100, and Tony gets out, knocks on a door, wants some rent. They weren't there, so he gets back in, and then he takes them back to TGI Fridays. They leave him and then get in their own Range Rover. So that's proof enough that they're in a Range Rover. They meet people. They leave their Range Rover alone. They go off with people. Could it be that John Marshall has actually arrived and taken them somewhere? They've just parked their blue Range Rover down this lane, out the way, not going to be questioned. They need it out the way. John Marshall comes along, picks them up, takes them somewhere. Meanwhile, as that's happening, things are getting ready over there by the blue Range Rover. People are starting to hide. People are there with their guns. They're locking and loading kind of thing. Tony Pan Craig with John Marshall come back round to pick that Range Rover up. They all get out. They all walk to their place. They're ambushed. Something like that. I don't know. I haven't thought that through. That was just something that popped in my head when it said 4 people in there as it crossed the road, or this man believed that he doesn't know why, but he believed that there was 3 or 4 people in this Range Rover, the ones with grills on the lights. Doesn't it make sense that it was Tony Pan Craig and John Marshall if their blue Range Rover was already there, which it was, apparently. It had been there and been in there in that area for over an hour, according to Rebecca Carr, because she saw and identified Pat Tate in there at 5:45. So they get down the lane, 5:45, they go down the lane, park their car with this Sierra. The Sierra just takes them off somewhere. They meet John Marshall. John Marshall's got to take them back to get their Range Rover, and it's there they're ambushed and killed. Just a thought, just a theory. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. this is my contribution to the story of John Marshall. Take care of yourselves.